John, whatever you want me to call you. but what was that greeting? There was a greeting that you sent me on the email, how you greet people.
Yes, the greeting is Oni Bonjour, which is Oni is sort of like hi, and Bonjour is a greeting that that takes into account the first man that was put on the earth by the Creator, and his name was Nanabajo. And so when you say Bojo every morning, you're honoring our creation. And so you say Ani Bojo, and you give your name, Eyaabay Anishinabek. That's my name. Makwa Dodam, which is Bear Clan. And then you would say, Ani Bojo, Eyaabay Anishinabek, Makwa Dodam. Anishinabek Undao, which is that my tribe or my tribal affiliation is with the Anishinabek Nation. So you go through that, and that's the way that you introduce yourself before peers, before friends, but also you would say that to show your place in creation as well.
So you can now say that to Elizabeth. Elizabeth is one of your fans. From
Hi, Elizabeth.
Good morning.
Very nice to meet you.
I am a fan. Thank you so much. I so much appreciated your first session. So much to learn from you. I appreciate it. So I'm here to learn from you.
Well, thank you very much for all your kind words. I almost blushed.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And I so much appreciate Vikram's effort in connecting everyone, learning from each other. So I'm happy to be here.
No, it's really nice. I mean, just the fact, look, I mean, I really, that 1 hour was, I also found that too less, because I could not take it further because Mr. Panchu was coming in, and definitely we couldn't. But normally these sessions do go on longer, and Elizabeth knows that sessions do go longer. So of course, but what Eyaabay and John, whatever you want to call him, he was just giving us that greeting, the greeting in their thing. So is it possible to repeat that for Elizabeth?
Yeah. So I would say Ani Bojo, Eyaabay Anishinabek, Makwa Dodam, Wasauksing Anishinabek and Dao. So that once again, it gives my name, my clan, where I live, and my tribal affiliation, and it's sort of all wrapped up, and it provides that to my peers, and I guess that's also part of the whole cultural aspect of I mostly do mediations with Indigenous people. That's 90% of the mediations I do. And so understanding the cultural aspect of all of the people around the table or around the circle is so important to get that, and to not have somebody explain it at the, for half an hour before a session begins. It's intrinsic to the process, and that used to be part of our cultural way of greeting and of having gatherings, because back before contact, our communities were separated by a fair bit. It usually took 2 or 3 days to get to another community. And then when all the communities would come together, that's when we would have the powwow, which is the gathering of all of the communities and the community people, and there would be drumming and dancing and so on. But there was also a lot of subtle aspects to the cultural gathering, that the young men, for instance, when they would dance, they would let their hair hang loose, and it wouldn't be braided or anything. And that would let young women know that they were available. And also you would wear your clan colors when you were dancing. So you never married within your clan, you always married outside your clan. So you had your clan colors. You had the your hair was not braided because in a traditional sense, only your mother and your wife can braid your hair. So when you had it loose, it meant your mother wasn't going to braid it. She wanted to get rid of you. And also that you were displaying your dance prowess before the entire group. And the young ladies, when they danced, they would often do the shawl dance, and it's a beautiful dance. And they would have their regalia that they spent maybe a whole year making, and they would dance around, and they would dance, and their feet would leave the ground, and they would be jumping, and they would be just celebrating life and celebrating the day. But a married woman, when she dances, her feet never leave the ground. That there's always one foot on the ground when they would dance, and then their shawl or their outfit would sway like it was being blown by the wind. And so as soon as you saw the young men with their unbraided hair, and the women the young ladies that would be dancing and feet leaving the ground, you knew that they were shopping. So that was an immediate thing there, and because of you can't marry within clans, that kept the genes strong, and it brought the different communities together because of the intermarriage. So to understand that is to be really one step ahead. And there's a really good example of that happened to me earlier this year. I had a mediation involving a family and the local coroner and the Attorney General's office here in Ontario. And what had happened was that a young man, probably I think he was about 18, 19, he stole a truck. And it was in the middle of the night, and he had some substances, alcohol and drugs in his system, and he was driving the truck at a high rate of speed, and he crashed into a tree, and it killed him. And the police showed up, of course, not very long after the crash, and they saw he had passed away. They called a coroner, and it was evident that the young man was Indigenous, but he had no ID on him. So the coroner said, "Well, we'll take fingerprints and we'll go through the whole process." But one of the police officers that was there said, "I think he looks like so and so." And but didn't actually tell the coroner. Well, the coroner goes through his process, and it takes about 3 days to get a definitive identification on this young man. But in the traditional way about when somebody passes away, in our tradition is that the spirit leaves the body, but the spirit wanders around, and because the spirit is confused, like what's happening to me, and so the spirit will usually stay by the body, but then there's what we call a sacred fire. That's as soon as the evening of the passing, a sacred fire is built, and the sacred fire will pull the spirit in. There's prayers, there's ceremony, and so on, and the spirit will stay around the sacred fire. The sacred fire in this community goes on for 3 days, 3 nights, 3 days, 3 nights. It never goes out. And so that is the way to address the spirit, to quieten the spirit. And then during those times, there's instructions by a holy person who gives the spirit instructions on how to get to the spirit world, the journey that must be taken to get to the spirit world, so that that spirit can join their ancestors. And it's said that in the spirit world, the ancestors know that this is happening, and they prepare a feast for the spirit that's coming their way, for their relative. And all this is done in very strict 3 days, 4 days at the most. And this body was in the morgue for 3 days. And so the dispute was that the coroner was not taking due diligence at finding the identity. The police officer, who thought he knew who the person was, did not go that extra step and start working on it immediately. And so therefore there's this sort of metaphysical aspect of disconnection. And the coroner's office and the attorney general's office missed the boat here because they didn't understand some of the very strict spiritual values that were part of that community. And if the person were Jewish, say, that there's very strict ways about the way that Jewish people are buried in the time frame and so on, same as Muslim, and I'm sure in other religions as well. There's a strict adherence to a specific way about doing things, and in this instance, it was not followed. During the course of the mediation, we really found that the coroner was following the instructions based upon the Coroner's Act and all of the different legislation and policies that were there. But the coroner actually retired just a few months after this event because he was already in his 70s, and he might have just missed the boat a little bit, but it wasn't out of any kind of willful problems with it. It just happened. It's just that it was a confluence of events that gave the family all kinds of issue. And I think part of it is the understanding of that immediately within the mediation process. And we did have caucuses, and I would go into the caucuses with the Attorney General, with the coroner's lawyer and the coroner, and I would describe some of these situations and that kind of spiritual angst that was going on. And last time I was on, I talked about the balance of the spiritual, the emotional, the physical, and the intellectual self. Well, this was out of balance. That physically they had the body, the emotions were there, but the spiritual aspect of it was not given as much credence as it should have. So therefore, we had a huge dispute. So that's that whole idea about balance. And that's the whole idea about understanding immediately what the situation is and what the problem is, and try to hit at those specific things. And as because of my understanding of the traditional values, I was able to speak to the family when I would go into their caucus room, and they didn't have to explain anything to me. I knew it, and so that helped the process, and we actually came to I think a fair and equitable decision by the end of the day. And there was still grief and by this occurred a couple of years ago, but you're rehashing things that brought the family enormous grief. The coroner, after fully understanding it, gave a very heartfelt apology to the family, one-on-one to the family, and it was still a very emotional day and very trying, but just the understanding of why this occurred was so important to the family, and it actually I think we'll make some changes within the Attorney General's office on understanding some of the traditional values that they may be dealing with.
Interesting part is that we have the same thing here, that the concept of the soul being around for 4 days. On the 4th day after a person dies, there is a ceremony, and then it's said that yes, the soul leaves that place and everything. So how come this happens? I mean, imagine you're so far away from us, but we have that similar concept. Where does it come from? I think I think this will also be a common thread which will come up between people around the world, because these are things which, look, we know because we followed it and it is out there, and it's not like, I mean, of course we were colonized, but at least we were maybe larger numbers, so our traditions and all those carried on. But this is very interesting. I mean, aren't you amazed that sitting in India, we have the same ceremony after the 4th day after a person passes away?
That is amazing. And I was fortunate enough to go to Bolivia in South America a number of years ago and attended a social justice conference and met with many of the indigenous people in Bolivia. And I took part in a couple of ceremonies. And the ceremonies are strikingly similar to the ceremonies that we have here, and they're like 5,000 or 6,000 miles away, and it's just amazing how some of our values and some of our traditional ways about doing things are strikingly similar in far different areas around the world, which leads me to believe that there's something there, that there's some aspect of truth that were passed on to us by our ancestors untold generations ago.
Yeah.
And it really is quite amazing. And there's a wonderful story about that. And probably I'm going into more anecdotal kind of things right now than
that's what we need. We need
that.
that. We're just listening. This is what this session is for. To listen.
Okay.
Look, let me tell Elizabeth that Eyaabay has 13 grandchildren. So now all that knowledge that he's giving them, he has to give us. So this is what it is. You're sitting with your grandchildren and you're telling us stories. Maybe mediation can come in somewhere. Yeah, Elizabeth. Elizabeth saying something.
I completely agree with you. Yes, we really need him to share all that with us. And in the anecdotes that you're going to include regarding what you just explained, I just want to ask you if you believe that spirituality is necessary for closure. Is that a way to deal with all the negative emotions, all the disagreements, and move on, like you were explaining, taking into account not only the body and the mind, but move on to the emotions, and from there move on to the spirituality? So would that give some kind of closure in most cases, or?
Well, it does. Many of my mediations we have within a circle. We do away with the tables where there's the plaintiff on one side, the defendant or whatever on the other side, and they give their briefs and so on, and it's very linear. And one of the first things I do is to get rid of that linear aspect to things and have a circle. And depending upon the situation and depending upon the people, I will ask if it's acceptable to open the session with a prayer. And so I will open with a prayer in most cases. If there are Indigenous people in the room, I'll bring out some sacred objects and I'll put them on a blanket in the center of the circle. And the sacred objects may be my pipe. It'll be a tobacco, a cedar, sweetgrass, and sage. And I'll also have a smudge bowl. And depending upon the severity of the bad feelings in the room, I will smudge the the participants with sage, and the sage smoke is cleansing. And so it helps cleanse the spirit. And so I'll go around the room and everybody will wash themselves with the sage smoke. And if this issue or dispute has been going on for a long time, I will do a brush off ceremony. And the brush off ceremony, after they're smudged, I will take the eagle feather and I'll ask them to turn around and I will brush their shoulders like this. And what I'm doing there is I'm brushing off all of the bad feelings and all of the heartache and all of the anger that they're bringing to the circle, and I want it gone. And so I'll brush it away from them. And then after that, we'll start the discussion around the circle. And I think I may have mentioned that I was involved with a fairly major mediation earlier this year that had the dispute's been going on for more than 20 years. And there's enormous bad feelings, enormous anger. The whole session started out with anger, and when the people were talking around the circle, their discussion always seemed to center on anger, and so we let that go the first day. They had to spill it. They had to get it out there. They had to allow it to leave. So that was fine to talk about the anger. And then the next day, and that session went on all day. The next day I did the smudging and the brush off ceremony, but the discussion centered around what is their hope for the future? What do they want for their children and grandchildren? And how do they see this circle, these group of people? How do they see this group of people allowing that future to proceed? Then it was starting to be more uplifting. They were starting to look to the future with more positive ideas and more positive attitudes. So that started getting things a little better. And that took the whole day. And then the next day, we centered around, what can you do to make that future possible? What can you do individually to turn a negative thing into a positive future for your children and grandchildren? What are the steps you can do today, tomorrow, and next year to make that possible? So they talked about that. Then on the fourth day, and we tend to work in fours with these circles and with many of our things. The question there was, what can the community do? How can the community come together? And what changes do you need community-wide to allow that future to be possible? And so you went from anger and name calling almost to how do we work together as a group? Obviously how I can do it individually, and then how we can work together as a group to bring positive change to this whole process.
What we're going to do right now is, because Elizabeth is here, we have to put her on the spot. Elizabeth, what you're going to do is you have to tell us about the symposium, please. This is this week's Eyaabay. This is this week, or the people who are coming in this week. Of course, you started it, and then I'll tell you about the other people. Yes, Elizabeth, okay. Please tell us about the symposium.
Well, I believe this symposium, more than anything, it brings connections. And I think this allows everyone to share their perspectives, their ideas, their skills, their knowledge, so that we can all learn from each other. I don't think there is a right way to do everything or specific way to deal with every case. I really believe every case is unique. However, there are many strategies that can be really helpful to deal with mediation. And I believe we need to move on from what we already know, what we have learned from the books, from the past, from history. I think we need to work harder. And I think we need to do a lot more. And I think we can do more in the mediation field, working together, putting all those strategies and ideas together. Because we need to work, like John is saying, with not just individually, but with communities, with societies. So I really love about this symposium, this opportunity to learn from everyone, to share our ideas, and to try to work together to make a difference. I truly appreciate being able to be part of sessions like the one presented by John Beaucage. He's amazing. I think his wisdom can help a lot of people. So I hope they're listening and they're watching the recorded videos, because there is a lot to learn here. Thank you. I appreciate it from both of you.
And Elizabeth, what about the indigenous people of Venezuela? When are we talking about that?
Well, in general, we can talk more about that. Yes,
okay.
In the future, I really want to keep learning from John Beaucage here. But it's just lovely to see those traditions, those values that keep together so many communities. And in Venezuela, it works that way. Venezuela is a country where we have many cultures coming together, and we're just used to that. We don't look for differences between each other as something bad. We appreciate, it's like a melting pot. We have so many people from many cultures all together, and we just appreciate that opportunity of getting together and learning from everyone. That's what I love about the way the indigenous people are in Venezuela, and the way that I see that it works for them. So I don't see why we shouldn't be learning more about it, more about them. So that's what I believe. And I want to keep learning more of their ways to deal with conflicts and negative issues.
But I think the term that we use out here is unity in diversity. That's what, for India, you can understand how diverse India is also. But Eyaabay, you can see how many people there are from Canada. How come this has happened? I don't know. I mean, there is a lot of activity, I think, in terms of indigenous people in Canada. I can see that. But we have some glamour. We have Mrs. Canada Globe also. She's from the Métis Nation. And of course, Girishji here, he is someone who's a social worker, of course, awarded by the Indian government for the work he's doing from the nomadic communities. So he'll talk about that. So, I mean, of course, Kenya, we've had some people from Kenya. So it's been really interesting. Sarah, I've had discussions with her in the conference and otherwise, that symposium on heart, soul, spirituality. So she's working with indigenous communities in Australia. So Rosalia is with the government in Canada, but she's also in the government, also being a mediator. She's working with indigenous communities. So I mean, I think it'll be, Jim is also from, I'll tell you which nation he's from. So it'll be interesting.
From Six Nations. He's a very good friend of mine.
Okay, so he's good. So you know him. So it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting week. And you started the week. So that's
yes. Yeah.
And of course,
a lot of good people.
Yeah. And Ecuador, we'll get some thing from Ecuador. So this is what I had to put out there so that people know. Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, I was going to have a little bit of a teaching, I guess, or part of a history that is interesting in terms of, I find it very interesting and educational, and it relates to some of our stories here. and it goes back before contact. That and there's a lot of aspects of the spiritual aspect of things. Is that when we have spiritual ceremonies and we try to make contact with the spirit world, to understand our notion of the spirit world is that the spirit world is beyond us, and that there are spirits there that the Creator allows to come to Earth to take a physical form, and they eventually go back to the Creator. In the spirit world, there is no time. Past, present, and future are all that. It's just, you can go to any particular time frame whatsoever. And so when you contact the spirit world, you can sometimes see get some messages about the future, sometimes about the past, what's happened in the past, sometimes the right now. But before contact, there was a call, and it was a spiritual call to many holy people around North America to go to what's now called the Four Corners in the United States, and that's in New Mexico, Arizona, and I can't remember all but it's where the Hopi Nation would be, or the Navajo Nation. The Hopi are a slightly different group than the Navajo, but they were from down in that way. And all these spiritual people were called, and this probably occurred maybe in the year 1300, maybe somewhere around there. Like it was like 600-700 years ago, and it was a couple hundred years before contact. And so for all over North America, they spent over a year traveling to this location, and they got there at the beginning. About in the springtime, and they had ceremonies all summer long, and all this the great spiritual people from all across North America attended this. So there was probably more than 1,000 of these very spiritual people, and they came there and they had the ceremonies, and they were given prophecies by the Creator, and actually these prophecies were inscribed on stone paintings. They would paint on the stone to allow that the word of the prophecies to go forward, and that there would be physical evidence. And so some of those pictographs are still available, and they're closely guarded in that part of the country. It talked about a time when there would be and it was described as a white cloud that would come to Turtle Island, that come to North America, and it would start in the east. And this cloud would bring great misfortune and disease to the people that live there, and it would be a terrible thing that would last forever. It would never go away. This cloud that would bring disease, and then eventually it would come from the west, and the cloud would come and it would meet in the middle of North America, and that would be a time when the power, when the influence, when everything that we as Anishinabek people had would be starting to dissolve. It would be a time of great misfortune. It would be a time of just when we were sinking to our lowest low, and this would continue on for many generations, and it would continue on to a point where the earth itself was rebelling against this incursion in North America, and it was said that there would come a time when the water from the rivers would be unfit to drink, that there would be a time when the air would be unfit to breathe, when the Anishinabek people were living off of the cast outs of the new people that came to this land, and that would continue on, and there would be a great sign that would be shown, and after this great sign was shown, then the Anishinabek people would be revitalized. That they internally would start gathering their strength, and that they would start doing more of what the Creator intended for them to do. And one of the tasks that the Creator set out for us was to take care of the Mother Earth, to be stewards for the Mother Earth, to allow the Mother Earth to thrive, and in this instance, to heal. So that sign, and it's part of the pictographs, was when the eagle landed on the moon. The eagle is, and we call that eagle Megazet, and that's our greatest spiritual guide is the eagle. The eagle would land on the moon, and that would be the sign when things would start to turn, when we would start to gather our strength, and when we would return to the path that the Creator originally set out for us. So the eagle landed on the moon in 1969. So from that point on, and in Canada and the United States, we started returning back to our spirituality. We started gaining more political influence, and we started becoming stronger. And so that was a very specific sign. The other sign that that was prophesied was that there would be a house that was thrown into the sky. And when this house was thrown into the sky, that's when the sign was that the earth was, that the Mother Earth was damaged to a point that all humankind would suffer. And so that our responsibility was to begin the teachings and begin that process of healing of the Mother Earth, and that the damage may not be irreconcilable, but the damage was still there. And so that whole aspect of looking after the earth was one of our responsibilities, to do those teachings, to make sure that it was understood that the Mother Earth is a living, breathing entity that must be looked after. And that if the Mother Earth has a disease or parasites, that the Mother Earth will shrug them off to look after itself. So we have to be cognizant that that everything has a spirit, and everything needs to survive, and everything has to be available to look after the earth first. And if we look after the earth in such a way as that even if the tiniest little creatures are subject to death and destruction, that death and destruction goes on up the chain, so that eventually it's us. So we're taught that even the smallest little creature is important as any creature, and that we have to look after it in order for that all of us can survive. So that was a teaching that was provided to me by an elder from who actually was a history professor at the University of British Columbia. She's since passed away, but very powerful teaching, and those pictographs are still available for viewing, but only to very select few. I've never seen them. I've seen the pictographs in a place called Peterborough, Ontario, here in Canada, but I've never seen the ones down in the Navajo / Hopi Nation.
So now this house being thrown into the sky, I think that part of it, what that would mean, we'll have to understand. We'll see. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that's probably the space station.
Could be.
So, and of course, the Eagle was Apollo 11, one of the Apollo missions, when Neil Armstrong said the Eagle has landed.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, we'll have to connect it to the right. I mean, we'll see how it works. But it's interesting that these stories are there and there is something to it somewhere, which, of course, to understand it under science and everything, I think never to be explained. So, but I think this is really important. So, but you'll have to tell us a bit more about the mediations.
Yes, well, I think that probably, and I was actually going to speak more about the circles that we have, that we do try very much, or I try very much to have our mediations in the circle, and the circle ensures that there's nobody at the head of the table, that all those around the circle are equal, and that whenever you speak, you're actually making eye contact with everybody around the circle. That I've seen so many times in a traditional mediation, when you're at a long table and it's this linear process, that who's ever giving the mediation brief will often look down at their paper and read from the paper and try to avoid eye contact. They'll try to avoid eye contact with the people they're having disputes with, and that is wholly discouraged in the circle. That you don't have a table in front of you. You're sitting on a chair, and when you speak, you're talking to the group, and it's hard not to maintain eye contact. And I had a mediation a couple of years ago, and it involved a police brutality issue. And there was a family that were suing the local police force and about a brutality situation. And it was after a sports tournament, and the sports team was young. They were 17, 18 years old. They won the tournament. They were in a hotel, and they started drinking alcoholic beverages at underage, but they still got a hold of all this beer, and they started drinking, and they started partying, making lots of noise. And the security from the hotel came up to the floor, and this was a sports team where there's like 20 young men that are 17, 18 years old, full of beer and full of testosterone, and basically chased the security guards off the floor. And then they called the police. 2 police officers showed up, and they were well trained. And the one thing is that the hockey team was Indigenous, the sports team was Indigenous, and the 2 police officers, both of them were of color. They were not Caucasian, and they understood some of the aspects of dealing with other people of color, and they tried to calm things down. And they spent about a half an hour trying to calm things down. Well, one young man decided that he had had enough of this, and he took a swing, punch at one of the officers, and hit the officer on the side of the head, and the officer fell down. The other officer grabbed this young man, and through his training and so on, wrestled him to the floor and restrained him. the first guy was a little bit he was out of it for a little while, and the second officer handcuffed the young man. But in the process of restraining him, he hit his face on the side of a door on one of the hotel rooms, so he broke his nose and he had a black eye. And I guess he may have had a separated shoulder when they were restraining him. So the family said that basically they thought that the police were over exuberant in their carrying out of their duties. So it went. There was a lawsuit for many thousands of dollars, and the court ordered a mediation before it was to go to court. So the first thing I did when I was appointed as a mediator, and the first thing I did was we were in a large office setting with a table and so on. So I asked if we could move the table aside, and both well, there was a number of lawyers. There was a lawyer for the insurance company. There was a lawyer for the city. There was a lawyer for the police officers. There was a lawyer for the plaintiff, and so they all agreed that we could move the table aside and we could have a circle. And I excluded the lawyers from the circle. I wanted to hear from the people that were involved. And also before we started the circle, I asked if it was okay to say a prayer, and everybody agreed that the prayer was fine. And then I talked to the police officer and I said, when it comes to your turn to talk, don't use police speak. You're not on the stand. Because if you've ever listened to a police officer on the witness stand, they're like a robot, and they go through their notes, and it's sort of a robotic kind of voice, and it kind of makes them just not quite human. It makes them unapproachable. It doesn't. There's no connection. So I said, you got to get rid of that. You're a person, and you're talking to another young person. So we had the session. We went 4 times around the circle, and basically the first time was what happened in the situation. Could you just explain the whole situation? So they were very candid about what actually happened, and the young man said that he had too much beer, and he had some anger issues, and basically he was saying that some of this is on me. So I did some of this. So, and anyway, it goes around on what happened, and then it goes around of the apology. Everybody like you apologized for what you did that may have exacerbated the situation that ramped it up. So we had that. The third time around was, what could I have done different? What is it that I could have done different that could have got us out of this situation? And then the fourth time was, what can we do to look after the situation so it doesn't happen again? Well, it went wonderfully. We started. There was still the issue of the lawsuit for it was tens of thousands of dollars, and we broke out into caucuses, and I would go from caucus to caucus, and eventually we got it down to that the police department or their insurers would pay for the travel expenses to come to this session, and they would pay for the lawyer. And that was it. But and then there would be an apology to each other, the young man and the 2 police officers, and they did apologize to each other because they both said, I could have done something a little different that might not have involved an injury. And then what happened afterwards, after that apology, was truly, I think the crowning achievement of the mediation itself was that one of the police officers said to the young man, well, when you're in Toronto next time, if you're ever in Toronto, here's my phone number. And let's us go out for something to eat. Let's us get together so that we could connect. And gave him his home number. If you ever need anything, it doesn't matter where you are. If there's some kind of issue or some kind of problem, give me a call and I will try to help whatever situation you're in. And so there was that personal connection that got away from the aspect of there's a police officer, there's somebody in trouble, and I'll say my piece, you say your piece, and we'll go our own way. There was this connection afterwards that established that there was interpersonal things that they each understood about each other that were that I hope is lasting. I never followed it up afterwards, but there was so much goodwill there. I'm sure that the young man gave him a call at some point, but that was extra special. That was truly a great thing, and it was just getting away from the linear approach to mediation that puts a line in between the two sides, and that line is like a barrier, and you only cross that barrier through a little tiny hole when you're speaking to each other.
From the circle part of it, let me tell you two things. One is what I've done is I've created this World Mediation Circle, which means a lot of mediation circles, and this is one large circle which everyone is part of. So one of the circles is going to be Indigenous Peoples Mediation Circle, and you are going to be part of that for sure. So it's just the idea being in that circle, let's get everyone who is, okay, I'm not saying only Indigenous, there can be people otherwise. Maybe yes. Elizabeth might want to be, whoever wants to be part of it. But in that circle, let's discuss all these things which might be, the certain common threads and all that. So that's one. Then there'll be one global climate change circle, but which will also go down right till the community level. So you have a small little community. So there'll be one circle there. When circles grow, a national one, of course, a global one. So that's the idea behind it. It's the thought. I'm putting it together. So from the circle part, this is one thing that I wanted to put out to you. And otherwise, I think the new thing that I'm trying to, I just thought about it while you were saying, I think today this screen, I think is something similar to what a circle would be, because everyone is out there, you're looking at everyone. So maybe the term that I'm going to start using is that the rectangle is the new circle. Sounds
yes.
Because I think it's really good. I think it brings us all into one screen, and I think it's it's something which, for me, of course, that's the only world that I live in. So I think that's perfect. I think. Yeah. So Elizabeth, anything on the circle part of it that you want to ask Eyaabay?
No, I just think it's a wonderful idea. It's a great way to start working with the communities and helping out. So I think it's an amazing project.
Well, I think it is too. And Vikram, that's a wonderful idea. And mediation's only been around mediation's been around forever. But the aspect of court-ordered mediation is sort of new, because courts are so busy and it's so costly and so on. And so the whole aspect of mediation and how to conduct mediations is evolving, and it should evolve to take into account different peoples, to take into account different traditions, different spirituality aspects, and you cannot, in my mind, leave out the spiritual aspect of anything we do. And that's the whole thing about balance. If we're out of balance, things don't go right.
But let me tell you, I should put a warning out there. With me, never ever talk about the courts, because my rant will start, because that's one world I just don't know why it exists. Mediation in the courts, this should not exist, because the whole concept behind it is there's a gun on your head that this whole court process will cost you so much, it'll take so much time. Go into that room, go settle, and come back. That's the way that whole structure is, which is not mediation, which is really not mediation. The idea being people should be working together to resolve, like you said, about the aspect of that connection between people. There is so much more that's happening there. And of course, this heart soul spirituality thing, again, you'll hear me say this a lot. And I did a symposium on this in April. Heart, soul, spirituality, and mediation. If you get time, please watch some of the sessions.
Okay.
If you go to mediatorvikram.com, you'll find a kind of, like an index, you'll find lots of things, but there's too much out there. Now
Yes,
we have almost about 400 videos out there. So I don't expect you to watch all of them. But the concept being this, that we have to put this across that world. It'll be difficult to get over that, because obviously the judiciary being inefficient and not being able to handle their work is going to be pushing it towards mediation. Let that world exist. I think we have much more that we can do on the other side, connecting people. This is what the whole idea behind that World Mediation Circle is. If you read about it, I put it on my website also. The whole thing being that a humanistic approach, a values-based negotiation, if you want to call it, that's what we have to put across. Right? I mean, there is collaboration. You want to collaborate. You want to understand the other person. You want to connect. You want to heal. There is so much more. I mean, so that's what that whole thing is. We'll keep developing that. Let this world do what it has to do, and we'll think that one day they'll understand that this is not really mediation happening here. Maybe the twain will never meet. Let them not meet. It's okay. We'll have different worlds. So,
exactly.
but one thing you have to tell us is that the next generation, how are they looking at it? Wow.
That's a really good point. It seems like this past 20 years has been an escalation of court issues, of litigious events that are occurring, and so it's one of these things that's like a groundswell. Well, if I get my coffee that's too hot, I'm going to sue the restaurant. If I walk down the street and I trip over a pebble, I'm going to sue the store that's next door to it. And it just seems like it's a way to obtain money or whatever without really working. And somehow or another, I think we have to get by this, that we have to look at human interaction on a greater scale. That we're in a process of looking after the earth, that we have enormous climate events that should be our number one focus, not on whether or not your coffee was too hot this morning and that kind of thing. So there's so much I think we have to do, and I'm hoping that the younger generation is starting to see that and will aid in that whole process. And we can only hope for the best, and that things will get better.
Well, I think what's really happening is, which is again something all around the world, the aspect of communities themselves breaking up. So if you don't have that whole community aspect there, definitely then that connection is not there. If the connection is not there, then it doesn't matter. There is nothing. So it's basically down to, let's go to court. Let's take this person to court, because otherwise, which is what we're trying to create, that we have these, could be elders, could be people, they could be younger, but they have that wisdom, whatever. So those people should be available to them. But how are they going to be available to them when there is no community? Things have broken down to that individual house. Finally, it's come down to that. So I think the work behind this soul circle aspect will also be to bring the communities together. So that's why I'm trying to put it. Let's create one in your own community. Of course, Here in this case, it is a mediation circle, so identify your mediators there. But that way, at least you'll start getting a community together. It'll be a slow process. It'll be a slow process. I'm not saying it's going to happen so fast, but I think let's put the seeds everywhere. That's how
exactly. Very good.
But the next generation, are they even in terms of the tradition and the rituals and all that? Are they looking at that?
Yes, they are. They're young people now are understanding their language, understanding their culture, their spirituality far more than when I was that age. So it is being revitalized and it's strengthening the community. And that's my community, but still I think it could be all over. And I'm hopeful that that will in turn, if you strengthen the community, you strengthen the family and you strengthen the individual. And I see that as a positive step. And we have a situation here in North America, and certainly in Canada and the United States, where you have racialized communities that are almost cut off from other communities, and as a result, there's this whole idea of separation, and that in turn creates these processes where within your own little community you try to gain status by doing illegal things possibly or anything else to gain status within that micro community, and then it eventually leaks over into the other communities and it causes hurt. So the more we can integrate all communities, then the better off we will be eventually, and that we can look at gaining status through education, gaining status through other means that are positive and don't create a negative aspect with society at large.
Yeah, but just the fact that you're saying that the next generation is trying to look at their traditions and language and everything, I think it's a call from them that they want to connect. They need some connection somewhere, and I think we should use that. We should use this and then put them together, because a lot of things, I think, over time we'll just get lost, and we don't want that to happen.
That's right. That's right. And the last time we spoke, Vikram, you asked me about the Anishinaabe word for mediation, and I drew a blank, but yet it was so evident because I've used it so many times that there's a couple different words that could be used, and one is Anishinaabe Nundagazun, which is listening to the voice of the people, and so that gets that whole thing of, if we listen to the voices, they will tell us how to solve the problems, but sometimes we or the courts don't really listen. There's an involvement with doing thing by process, by rote, rather than allowing it to be organic. The other word or phrase is Minnow Bemadzewin, which is finding the good road. So that the two concepts, there's no specific word for mediation. You kind of describe what it does. So that's the two ways I would describe it.
But the symposium in September, you have to be part of that also. That's colonization, decolonization, and mediation. There's lots that we have to discuss, and this aspect of what is happening today in relation to mediation in the courts, I think that part of it being that decolonization, but that decolonization is also part of the same colonization aspect of how things are looked at. So you have to be part of that. Date I'll fix up with you, whatever you said.
Yes.
But but anything else that you want to tell us in relation to, because I'm telling you why, one thing that we also have to distinguish, which you can tell us, one is the mediation and the other is the arbitration. Are both the things happening in the community?
Yeah, I think both things are happening in the community. For instance, today there's a circle going on with students, and it's about a racial incident that occurred at the local high school. And so there's a there's a circle with the students that were affected by this racial incident, and it was a groundswell that came about from the community. So rather than undertake any other kind of process, it was immediately thought that a circle was the best way to tackle this and to get to the root cause of why these racial incidents occurred. And you know, I think that there's ups and downs with some of these things. When I went through high school and you know, the integrated high school and whatnot, and I don't really recall any real negative racial incident that occurred, but yet it all of a sudden now there seems to be these things that occur every now and again, and I'm not sure whether it's the way that external politics is going on, that the right and left are going further apart, and so there's more extremism that's happening, but I find that every now and again we see that there are racial incidents that are happening that seem to I guess they would inflame something that really has been quiet, and why is it happening, and why now, and you know, it's just one of these crazy things. So it is happening, and it's a groundswell of reasons and processes to look after incidents and look after problems.
Look, I finally connect all this thing again. I connect it to colonization, the aspect of divide and rule. The point is, when communities start finding an identity and they start getting together, there will be people on the other side who do not want that to happen. So they will keep dividing within the community, within communities. I think we just have to make sure that we understand that this is an external political aspect of it, and that divide and rule is not going to go away from this world easily, because people, of course, have been using it throughout. And even if when I look at, look at the US situation, when I look at their politics, when I look at if you look at 33% of the entire votes of the country and you can be the president, and 37% of the people don't even go and vote. So I don't know whether either it's 37 or people who've voted, or 30 and 33 don't go. One of those two figures, I'm not getting there. I might be going wrong, but both of the figures are such that when you can make a government, let's take it as 37% of the votes, which means you just have to get 37% of the people together. So you actually can alienate 63%. That's how politics works. So that means that is how the divide and rule will continue. And this is what I'm saying. Decolonization might have happened, but the same structure has continued, and that divide and rule has just continued with us. So we have to be careful, really careful on that. But I just feel that, yes, with the younger lot, I think if we can bring them together, off a political thing, because look, activism, advocacy, politics, I want to make sure that we stay away from that and get these people together who, again, the same thing about the people with the mediator mindset within these communities, within these younger people. Let them identify those people themselves, and when they come together and when they have these reasonable, fair people with impartial people within themselves, and then if they can become leaders, that will be when change happens, which is what the whole concept of the mediation circle is, or the circles. The idea being that, please identify these people within yourself. You don't need to teach them anything. They know everything. In relation to, of course, how the mediation happens, that technical word. And Elizabeth has heard me enough times on this. So for her, this is like, oh, this guy's repeating the same thing again. But Elizabeth, I have to tell him because he has to be part of the work that I'm doing. So I'm telling him that. So I just feel that we think that we can go and teach people, even the children in school. We don't have to teach them anything. They
Yes.
know exactly what mediation is. They're doing it. They've already identified those children who actually help them resolve disputes. We just have to tell them, yes, value these people, bring them together. That's where every school will have a mediation circle. Every community will have a mediation circle. That's the larger vision. So we just have to go there, put that whole thing together. That's all. But the moment
Yes.
we say we have come here to teach you something, it means that there is a process that you don't know about. And these are people that you don't know about. And we are going to come, we'll make a mediator and we'll throw it into your community, and suddenly magic will happen. We're going wrong there. We're going totally wrong there. So
That's exactly it. And you know, we're guides. We're not the person out in front. We do guide the people who already know what to do. As you point out, the kids already know what to do. They already know how to mediate.
Yep.
And you see it from the very youngest age that that the children can solve their own problems for the most part. And as the problems get more and more complex, maybe they do need a guide to help every now and again. But you know, we certainly don't have to teach that much. It's just guiding through the process, because sometimes when you get so close to it, you put blinders on and you don't see the wider world.
No. But
I'm going to have to head
Yeah.
off for my next call, Vikram. And Elizabeth, thank you very much. It was wonderful to be able to talk to you.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to hear from you and learn from you. And I really appreciate your sharing your experiences and knowledge with everyone. And I just wanted to ask you, have you published any books? Anything that we can buy to learn more from?
I've got a story. Well, it's an article in a magazine up here, and it is about mediating with Indigenous people. And I don't have the exact, but Alicia Kuhn, who was on last week or week before, she was one of my co-authors on that. And I can't remember the exact name of it. It was done about 4 years ago or 5 years ago.
Yeah. No, I'll send the link. I'll put the link out. I've
Yes,
got the link.
please.
Alicia sent me the link.
Oh,
Okay.
wonderful.
I have the link. I'll put it. Maybe what I do is I'll put a post out with the link and of course talking about your session. So that
Yes.
I'll do that.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very thanks a lot. And 31st, we have a special session on learnings and key takeaways at 7 o'clock India time. Please join us.
I'm on an airplane at that. I'm going to Africa on that
Wow.
day. So I fly to London first, and then I have a layover in London on September 1st, and then flying to Cape Town on September 1st.
Okay. So if there is time, I don't know what time you're flying and everything. If there's some time and you're sitting at the airport, just log in. It doesn't have to be the whole entire duration.
Okay.
Just come in and you can.
Very good. Thank you, Vikram.
Thank you very much. Yeah, see you.
Bye.
Thank you, Elizabeth.